Okay, welcome to another episode of Pound for Pound Boxing Report, episode 143. I'm your host, Michael. Joining me this week, Gail Buckenthaler, Communities Digital News, Daniel Carpio from the Inscriber. What's going on, ladies and gents?
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
For those who are new to Pound for Pound Boxing Report, Pound for Pound Boxing Report is a live YouTube show / podcast as well as blog that discusses all things. Mute your mic, Daniel. I'm getting some echo for me.
Sorry, my headphones off.
Okay, there it is. All right, thank you. Once again, Pound for Pound Boxing Report is a live YouTube show as well as podcast blog that discusses all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When boxing is bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns boxing, we will talk about it. If you want to find more information about Pound for Pound Boxing Report, one place you want to go to, that's the blog page, p4pboxingreport.wordpress.com. That's the link. You look to the right of the blog page, you will find links for the Facebook page, the G Plus page, Tumblr page, links to find us on Twitter as well as links to find the YouTube page. Also links to find where to listen to us via Google Play Music, via Stitcher Radio, SoundCloud, iTunes, Player.fm, as well as the email address, which is p4pboxingrpt@gmail.com. Starting on a bit of a sad note, earlier we had an episode devoted to the passing of Muhammad Ali. A couple of weeks ago, we devoted a segment of the show to talk about the passing of Bobby Chacon. Well, we lost another great in the boxing world, as the one and only Aaron "The Hawk" Pryor, a former junior welterweight champion, passed away in the interim between last week's show and this week's show, succumbing to heart disease at age 61. The Hawk, one of the greatest U.S. amateurs of all times, lost really what's a lot of folks consider an upset to Howard Davis, 76 Olympic trials. Had a bit of a slow start of his career because he couldn't get the fights because, let's just face it, he wasn't an Olympic champion. His early claim to fame was as a result of the infamous sparring sessions with Sugar Ray Leonard. For hardcore heads like ourselves, we know that Pryor used to give Leonard hell in the gym. Reports all over how he used to basically dominate Leonard at times, knocked him down. He knocked Leonard down on a few occasions. Leonard used to knock him down. They used to have some real world wars. So there was a slow start in his career, but once he got going, once he got that long-awaited title shot against Ken Pombalay, August 1980 in his hometown in Cincinnati, Pryor destroying Pombalay in round 5, I believe. Once he won that belt, he was a terror at 140 pounds, defended the belt multiple times. His career peaked with one of the, not just the greatest fights in the 80s, but one of the greatest fights of all times, fights with Alexis Arguello in December, 1982. Pryor winning by 14th round, stopping the great Alexis Arguello. For a rematch September 83, Pryor stopping him again, which signaled the first retirement of Arguello's career. But after that, his life really succumbed to the demons of drugs, particularly cocaine. He tested positive, I believe. His career came to a halt and really ended on a premature note. Fortunately for him, he overcame those demons, became a citizen, model citizen, really helping out young local fighters in his hometown of Cincinnati. I'll go to you, Gail, first, and then you, Daniel. Talk about the life and the storied boxing career of the one and only Hawk, Aaron Pryor. Unmute your mic, Gail.
Very sad.
Okay.
Very sad to hear about the loss of Aaron Pryor, who in his day was a fan favorite. Barely stood 5'7", an incredible record. Voted in at least the 20th century the best 140-pound fighter of the entire century. Now, remember, that includes one Alexis Arguello, who he beat twice. Once in their first fight, considered a controversial decision. You know, there were questions about whether his cornerman had given him an illegal drug in the corner in his water bottle because Pryor took so much punishment from Arguello and, you know, stood up to it. No one believed he could have done it without some pharmaceutical help. Well, he put those doubts to rest because the following year they had a rematch and he put Arguello down in the 10th round of a 15-round fight. And mind you, remember, those are 15-round fights back in that day. That fight between Arguello and Pryor was called by a lot of people the fight of the decade, the fight of the decade. And
you talk about the first fight. Okay.
The first fight. You know, think about all the other fights that went down in the 1980s, and that was called the fight of the decade. And according to Ring Magazine, considered in their rankings the 8th greatest title fight ever. That's amazing. So it's a little bit amazing that his name has faded as much as it was, but partially it was because he did have drug problems. He was addicted to cocaine. He was stripped of his title in 1985 due to his drug issues. Blessedly, he overcame those, but it did cut his career short. Thankfully, what there was of his career was so memorable and so impressive that his legacy is set in boxing. And he went back to his hometown in Cincinnati. He lived out the rest of his life there. He was a minister. He campaigned tirelessly in the community against drug abuse. He didn't do like a lot of former champions and, you know, do the sort of the, you know, autograph appearance circuit. He made some appearances. They were few and far between, but he made a few. And interestingly enough, earlier this year, he wrote an exceptional column after the death of Muhammad Ali for the Cincinnati Enquirer, the major daily newspaper in Cincinnati. I urge everyone to look that up. And he talks about his very first encounter with Muhammad Ali as a youth, which is very entertaining, and then later getting to know him more as a peer. And it's quite a journey and a real tribute to how much Ali influenced Aaron Pryor, which I really never knew. And it's a shame that the Hawk is now part of the boxing history that's behind us. I just don't think he was appreciated in his day. I'm not sure he's appreciated as much in context as he should be.
You mentioned the poll that he was considered the greatest junior welterweight of the century. You mentioned Arguello. I would throw him out because you got to remember that was his initial fight at 140 pounds. But I would include him ranking the greatest over Chavez Sr., who more known, more popular, more storied, more title defenses. But for folks to consider Pryor a better junior welterweight than Chavez, which Chavez, his claim to fame came when he was at 140 pounds. So for folks to rank Pryor above him, that says a lot to me. And I remember a old Ring magazine when I was a kid, where they used to have these comparisons between fighters of the past and fighters of the present. And one of the was of Pryor and Chavez Jr. And of the three guys who were featured, I can't remember their names now. I remember all three of them choosing Pryor to beat Chavez. I mean, Pryor, he was a terror. People thought of him as just a wild man because of the way he would enter the ring, and he seemed like he just was on a gang of jumping beans from beginning to end. He had boundless energy all over the place. Came into the ring screaming "Hawk time." pointing his fist at the opponents whenever fighter. I mean, you saw some of his fights. Hell, even when he got knocked down, he would get up, forgetting the count, and just go right after his guys.
He also had just his swings, were just not always very economical. I think that's a fair way to put it.
But here's the thing: when you look at him, and I would urge folks who have not seen the fight to go on YouTube and search Pryor, his first fight against Arguello. The most underrated thing about Aaron Pryor was his boxing skill. Yeah, he could punch, and yeah, he threw punches in bunches. Seemed like he threw 100 punches around almost. But again, his boxing skill. You could not have the amateur career that Aaron Pryor had one step away from the Olympics. I mean, rumors were that in '72, after the '72 Olympics, Leonard moved up in weight to avoid Pryor for that '76 Olympic team. You couldn't have the storied amateur career that Aaron Pryor had without being an expert boxer. So again, the skill of Aaron Pryor, his boxing skill, his jab, his ability to move, I think that was slept on because of his personality. I'll go to you, Daniel. Discuss the life and the career of Hawk Pryor.
It's one of those stories that does get lost over time, because it's kind of the same thing with Arguello. Like, hardcore people will know those fights they had with it, but in the era that they were in, did they get lost a little bit with the Four Kings still being around?
And by the way, I should add that this is the same Hawk Pryor who took apart Tommy Hearns during the amateurs as well.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Right.
But
back when people paid attention to amateur boxing, and that amateur boxing was shown on network broadcast TV frequently.
Yep. But that's the thing. Like I said, even with that, even when I said with all the stories of him schooling Leonard in sparring sessions, like I say, he got overshadowed by them. But I look at it tends to be now more of legacy. And I think about the situation now that Tyson Fury is facing, where Tyson Fury's faced a situation where he has now admitted he was addicted to drugs, addicted to cocaine. And we know, like, at times Pryor, I think, was fighting like either on cocaine or on crack sometimes. He's stated as such, but he was able to bounce back from it and be better for it. And not to mention that I still look at the legacy. I look at Cincinnati. I look at the fact that there was enough there where a talent like Adrian Broner, mind you, his antics outside of the ring, a talent like Adrian Broner, a talent like Robert Easter, can be cultivated there. Because unfortunately, unless you leave a really good legacy or a lot of people pay attention to it, you don't leave that mark going into it. Look at Philadelphia was going through. Not a lot of people paid attention to either Larry Holmes or Joe Frazier later on in the years, and that city has suffered as a fight town because of it. Cincinnati's not. Cincinnati looks to be like one of these remaining pockets that has a fervent hardcore area. And those are people that grew up watching Aaron Pryor. Now, as a fan, yeah, I'll always be disappointed that he never got to fight Leonard in the ring as a professional. Like, it's one of the fights that people legitimately say that Leonard ducked because of those sparring sessions. But at the end of the day, I look at the legacy and also his friendship with Arguello. Boxing does something where you can have your biggest rival wind up becoming your best friend. And that's what happened between Pryor and Arguello. Think about what Arguello did to be a politician in Nicaragua. And the Latin culture, where there's a lot of machismo going on, you don't essentially bring somebody that's your biggest rival there to help you, but he did. He brought Aaron Pryor down to Nicaragua to help him in a political campaign. That shows the deep of the friendship. And like we saw it with, I think the most recent real good example is Gotti Ward. Two rivals that just wound up becoming the best of friends. That's my look at it when I look at Aaron Pryor. Is a man that fell down, got back up, was better because of it, and left enough of a legacy in his hometown where it's now one of the small little pockets in the U.S. that still has a good hardcore fan base for boxing.
2 points. First, you mentioned the city of Cincinnati. As far as I'm concerned, there have been 3 great fighters, if you will, from the city of Cincinnati. One, Ezra Charles, who may be the greatest light heavyweight in the world, and also won a belt at heavyweight. Timmy Austin, who was a Bantamweight champion in the late 90s, early 2000s. I think he had a 6-year reign. And Pryor, who I would rank second behind Ezra Charles in terms of great fighters in the city of Cincinnati. You also talked about, Daniel, how he's been left out of those prominent fighters within that, particularly in the 80s. And I think that a lot of that's to do with I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that his career was shortened because of the drug use and whatnot. Because let's look at it. You had the fights with Arguello. Look at all the potential fights he had in around 140, between 35 and 47. Let's just put it that way. You had the fight with Leonard, the potential fight there, a potential fight with Hearns at 147. He had basically cleaned out the fighters at 140, maybe a fight with Saul Mambi or someone like that. But you also had a potential fight with Boom Boom Mancini at 35. And I don't care what anybody says, Pryor had called out Mancini for years. Mancini ducked him, wouldn't fight him at all, didn't want no part of him. And when his fights with Arguello, particularly the second fight, who was coming up? Hector Camacho at 130. Won the title in 83, moved up 2 years later in 85. When he beat Jose Luis Ramirez, they asked him who he would love to fight. One of the fighters he mentioned immediately after that win, Aaron Pryor. Imagine those two would have fought. So that's really the shame in terms of his boxing career. It was how it was shortened. He had all those potential fights there to make a lot of money. But again, his demons got the best of him. Thank goodness he recovered from that. But I think that had a lot to do why he is not mentioned amongst those fighters, those great fighters in the 1980s.
Not only that, like I said, it's not only that, it's just a mere fact that around that time, things also affected in the greater sports world. Remember, he was doing drugs around the same time, in the same year, so we saw in basketball, Len Bias.
Yeah.
That hurts a lot, yeah. Remember, people to this day, if we want to be, I know we're jumping from sport to sport, but when you look at basketball, Len Bias is right now the ultimate, along with Jay Williams, the what could have been player for an entire generation. And I think that affected Pryor a lot because he suffered through that around the same age when everybody was pretty much grieving over Len Bias. And around that time, people didn't have much sympathy for what he was going through. It took years for people to finally understand what he went through.
Indeed. Let's put a bow on this, Gail. Last words in terms of Aaron the Hawk Pryor?
I would urge everybody listening to us to get on YouTube. Thank goodness these days these fights are preserved for us. There are places you can find them, watch them, judge for yourself. I think you'll be very impressed. Watch the Arguello fights. There are 2 of them to enjoy, and it's a slow October. This is a great time to check up on your boxing history and enjoy those fights, because there's not a whole lot else going on. We're going to talk about another classic fight that's actually going to be rebroadcast on Showtime on Monday night later in the show. But this is a great time to go back and look at some of these guys and enjoy them like it's all brand new to you.
Indeed. The 2 Arguello fights, the fight in which he destroyed Cervantes, the fight against Akil Kameda, which was just so funny and entertaining to me. Even though he doubted Kameda was undefeated prior, he came in the ring fighting like a wild man. DeJuan Johnson as well. All of his fights, his title fights at least, you should be able to find on YouTube. So treat yourselves, to Gail's point, given that this is a slow period in boxing right now, to watch Aaron Pryor. For those to younger fans or to casual fans who don't know who Aaron Pryor was and what he was about, treat yourself to that to see what kind of fighter he was. And again, we commemorate, we honor, we celebrate the life and the career, as far as I'm concerned, the greatest fighter at 140 pounds, Aaron the Hawk Pryor. Hawk time, baby. Hawk time. Let's move on and do a recap of what went down this weekend. I'll start with you, Daniel. Ricky Burns defended his belt in Scotland against Kiryl. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name. That guy from Belarus, I'll just call him that. Burns won by unanimous decision, 118-110, 116-112 on the 2 other scorecards. And I'm reading ESPN's recap of it, and they basically said that while that guy from Belarus started fast, but Burns basically found his groove and had his way and won the bout. That differs from what I saw. Kiryl, to me, he started real good, was aggressive. I love the way he switched things up. He was in and out. He didn't come in the straight line. He switched from righty to lefty. He changed the intensity and the pace of his punches. What I mean by that is he would throw quick darting shots here and there, but then he would slow up just enough to make Ricky Burns commit himself a bit, and then he would counter. Won the middle round, some of the middle rounds, and it looked like Kiryl, the Belarus fighter, had seen. But the last 3-4 rounds, he found his second win. I thought he won those rounds, and at the end of the day on my card, I had him winning by 3 points. So I know why ESPN they presented this thing where Burns won the bout, no doubt. But I'm sorry, I have to disagree. I think this is another hometown decision for Burns that he didn't deserve.
Pretty much.
To you, Daniel.
You summed it up. Yeah, you summed it up there pretty much. I didn't watch the full fight. I watched the highlights of it, and then I just kept up with the social media reaction because I was out during Aaron's when the fight was airing. And when I watched some of the highlights, I got to say vibe. And I literally went, again. I'm like, you're literally doing this. And yes, this is the part, folks, where Gus calls me a UK hater. But but I say, again, not almost 2 weeks in a row from what looked like the attempted home cooking on the Crawler Linares fight, you have this. Now, there's been some little history with Ricky Burns and getting some questionable decisions. He is Scotland's Jesse Vargas for a reason. Yeah, I had to do that.
You had to go there. You had to go there.
Yep. At the same time, though, I can the big selling point is he's trying to get a fight with Adrian Broner, the same Adrian Broner that is just doing stupid things lately. But knowing full well that another person that has 2 other belts in that same division has called him out. But we all know he doesn't want to face that man.
No.
No.
He already lost to him before, but no. You don't want that.
He doesn't want that. And it's just, I looked at it, I literally just said again. I'm like, literally again? Because I saw the clips and I saw what you were looking at, Mike. Changing positions, the guy. Yes, I cannot pronounce his name for the life of me.
I think Gail put us in the chat. It's like his last name is Kiryl and his last name is pronounced like Relikh. So
Yeah, Kiryl
Relikh.
It's not that tough. It's just one of those names with a little too many consonants for those of us not used to the Cyrillic alphabet. But and interesting kid. He is trained by Ricky Hatton, even though he's from Belarus. So you've got a British trainer in his corner. You've got a crazy crowd, and I think Scottish boxing fans perhaps drink more beer per seat, than any other boxing venue in the world. I don't think anybody gets quite as tanked up as the Scottish fans do. So it was loud. It was really loud. And I don't care who you are as a judge, when you've got a crowd going nuts, it does affect you. But there is no way. One of the scorecards was 118 to 110. What fight was that person watching? The other 2 were 116 to 112. It's still a little wide for me. And here's the tough call. A lot, according to observers and according to the judges, Relikh was throwing more, but not landing with as high a percentage or landing as well as Burns. Well, that's a pretty subjective description, and I admit, not sitting there, not seeing it for yourself, not getting the impression of the force of the impact, which is something you really can only do inside the venue many times. I can see that argument, but come on, he had Burns down in the next to last round. He was on the canvas in the final round when the referee ruled it a slip instead of a knockdown. There was a lot of argument about that. Middle rounds were a throwaway, pretty much. And it would have been a tight fight either way. Definitely not a 118, 110 fight, not a chance. But it is tough to reconcile those 116, 112 scores.
Here's my thing.
I just can't see it.
Again, I'm going back to the ESPN recap of it. They gave this presentation like Burns was landing these clean, effective shots. They were not that clean, and the shots he was landing, they were not that clean. 2, they were not that effective, and 2, they wouldn't put any hurt on Relikh.
Oh, that's definitely true. Relikh either has a really good chin, or they weren't hurting him at all.
It's just that Burns is not that much of a puncher.
Yeah, right. So, if you really add up the rounds, Relikh was in control in the first part of the fight. Burns didn't really get his motor running till about the 4th or 5th round. The middle of the fight, 6th, 7th rounds were just sort of on cruise control for both of them. And it looked like Burns, if he stepped on the gas, would change the momentum of the fight. But Relikh came back out, did very well in the 9th, did very well in the 10th. The 10th was his best round, right there at the end of the fight. And I would need more explanation from the judges to see how in the world they gave it to Burns.
I'll just open it up and I'll ask this question for both you, Gail, and Daniel. Look, The word is that Burns won. Now he's seeking a bout against Adrian Broner. Assuming that fight happens, who do you think will win? Because listen, Burns he avoided him at 130, and given how he looked in this fight, I know Broner has had his troubles, but even at 40, 47, a catch weight, if you will, if Broner comes in with his head halfway right and in decent shape, look, I think he would beat him at this weight, just like I thought he would beat him at 30, 35.
No, I agree with you of that assessment. I mean, we'll have to kind of get through our first reaction, which is, who gives a shit about them fighting? I mean, I really don't. But once you get them both in the ring, I have to grudgingly admit, the version of Burns we saw doesn't beat the better version of Adrian Broner. With Broner anymore, you're just not quite sure what version of him is going to come in the ring, and that, I think, will make the difference.
Your thoughts, Daniel?
That's pretty much it. Like, Broner has been acting the fool lately, but
lately,
like,
how about more like again?
Yeah, we'll leave that one alone for the moment. But if Adrian Broner with his head on straight can beat Ricky Burns just on skill alone, like I said, you pointed out, it's one of the reasons why at 130 and 135, Burns wanted nothing to do with him. And it's the same thing. But now, if your option is, hey, you're going to try to fight an American fighter and maybe try to make a U.S. debut, and your options are Adrian Broner or Terrence Crawford, yeah, Ricky Burns' team is going to side with Adrian Broner.
Oh, no doubt about it. And Burns obviously has to be looking at Broner's behavior outside the ring, Broner's various issues, and thinking, all right, if I'm going to fight him, now's the time. Now's the time where he's, doesn't train well, he's distracted, he's got issues, maybe he catches him on less than his best night, and now's the time. And, Burns is not a young man either, so really is getting to be a now or never for him if he's going to do it.
Again, let's move on. Another fight I want to focus on. One of the best fighters in the world that folks don't know about. Now former flyweight champion Juan Francisco Estrada gave up his 2 belts to move up to 115 pounds. Made his debut last Saturday against a Filipino fighter by the name of Tagubon. Estrada winning by unanimous decision, 100-90 on all 3 scorecards. Look, this was basically a showcase bout for Estrada. He was dominant throughout. The thing I was looking for was the shape of his right hand, which he has had issues with over the past year, really. It looked okay. He threw the right hand without hesitation, and he landed it quite often on Tagubon. Estrada, he seemed to let his foot off the gas a bit over the second half of the bout. Seemed to be working on some things in there, and he wanted to get some rounders in. I'll just open it up for anybody, for you, Gail and Daniel, for those sort of fight. Your assessment.
It did look to me like he purposely let the fight go the distance. He wanted to test himself. He wanted to see how it felt. He wanted to get into a little deeper water. Maybe didn't want to put that right hand to the ultimate test against a guy that, he didn't need to pound this guy into submission. He's a journeyman. He was there strictly as, a cannon fodder type fighter. His name is Raymond Tagubon, and they were there to entertain, and he did. I liked his movement. I liked his body work very much. But if it was a fight meant to just, get out there and get some work, it got the job done.
Your thoughts, Daniel, if you saw the fight?
There was the same thing. I was checking into the bits and pieces of the fight, and it's pretty much what I expected. It was a showcase bout. And maybe you're reading into something, Mike and Gail, when it comes to him not blitzing out this journeyman, because we all know the reason why he's moving up to 115 is to get a rematch with Chocolatito.
Oh, yeah, of course. And why do you want to burn yourself up and burn yourself out and potentially hurt yourself again when you don't have to, because there are bigger things up ahead in the distance?
Yep.
Well, let's talk about that. What's next for Gallo Estrada? I mean, as you said, Daniel, the goal is to hopefully land a rematch with Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, who just moved up and beat Carlos Cuadras for the WBC belt. My question is, will he get it? Because when Roman Gonzalez has been asked about a potential rematch, either he wants a lot of money, or, like when I say a lot of money, I mean $1 million for that rematch, or he just hasn't shown that great interest in a bout. He seems more interested in a rematch with Cuadras. You also got Inouye up there. You got Luis Concepcion up there. So the question is, A, do you think that Estrada will eventually land that rematch with Chocolatito? If not, which direction do you think he will go? Do you think he will go try to seek a bout against Concepcion? Do you think he may try to get a fight with Cuadras to force a bout with Roman Gonzalez, getting to that #1 mandatory spot? I'll go to you, Gail, first. Where do you think he will go?
Well, I think that he would like a fight with Chocolatito, obviously, but I really like to see Estrada and Cuadras face off against each other.
They kind of an eliminated bout.
Yeah, exactly. If the either fighter, both of them have already fought Chocolatito, so we're talking rematch. Either way, although in Estrada's case at a different weight division, and I'd like to see them battle for it. I just like that idea a lot, and then you've got sort of that payoff rematch, and then we have the monster from Japan waiting in the wings, known as Inouye, by the way, for those listening.
Yep. Well, that's the whole thing. You're doing pretty much the same thing as Orlando Salido and Takashi Miura are going to be doing in December.
Right.
They're basically fighting to get a rematch with the guy that they both lost to, or like I said, in Salido's case, to a draw against.
Francisco Vargas.
Yeah. When it comes to Chocolatito, there's a good amount of people that legitimately do believe that Chocolatito lost that fight. And maybe his team does himself. And remember, Chocolatito's team had to go through a lot just to get on U.S. television, just to be noticed on U.S. television.
Right.
And they may feel that a rematch with Estrada, when technically, like Max Kellerman was right, technically was probably the toughest fight of his career. There's a chance of losing that, and there's a chance then you derail what HBO wants to do. HBO literally wants Chocolatito Inouye. They want that fight.
Yeah.
In other words, it took you so long to get to this spot. Why risk it now when you just getting here?
Yes, but it's incumbent upon the fan bases that Chocolatito has, because Chocolatito has both fans that are naturally Nicaraguan and some fans that are Mexican.
Right, especially in Los Angeles.
Yep. So it behooves those Mexican fans, just like some Mexican fans in Texas with Canelo, it behooves them to pressure Chocolatito to say, you can't leave this alone. You can rematch Cuadras, you can do that if you want, but people are always going to point out, people are legit going to tell you, you lost to Estrada.
Go ahead, Daniel. I'm sorry.
No, like I said, just like another fighter we're probably going to talk about later today, who's caution for safety has caused his career to be a laughing stock at this point. But luckily, Chocolatito has the comfort of having a division that's decent enough for talent. And Estrada can do the same thing. Estrada can try to go get Luis Concepcion's belt and make it a title unification. There are ways for him to get that rematch. It's just a matter of should it happen, I think, Chocolatito before and after, or after Inoue.
You know, the issue I think that must be going on, especially right now, is that fight with Cuadras was a lot tougher than anyone thought it was going to be. Cuadras was a live dog. He looked good. And Chocolatito's got to be wondering, you know, was that a function of Cuadras being just that good? Or how much did it have to do with me coming up in weight? I think he needs to get another fight under his belt at 115 to test that weight. You know, 3 pounds doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're standing next to a guy that's that small, it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference.
And when I
just don't think he's got enough, you know, time in the ring at 115, you know, to be taking those kind of fights head on yet. And when I say that, I mean Inoue or Estrada.
And when you're that small, the body percentage of 3 pounds, that means something. You talk about how it behooves the Mexican fan base to urge a rematch. It also means that those who follow the sport, who follow those small divisions on social media, put pressure to bear on Roman Gonzalez and his camp to say, hey, you keep talking about this fight, you keep talking about that fight. Well, you got this Estrada bout out there, this rematch. When are you going to fight him? Social media has to play its part. Outlets like this needs to play its part. And not just the promoters, but also force the networks, because we see the direction that HBO wants. Okay, HBO, if you want Inoue and Roman Gonzalez, which is great, why not force their hand to say to the networks, well, hell, go to Max Kellerman directly. He's all over Twitter. He's got the show now on ESPN, First Take. Say, hey, Max, why don't you talk about this Estrada guy? Put him in talk about him in a rematch with Roman Gonzalez, or better yet, what about an eliminator against Cuadras, so we can have a elimination bout here should Estrada win that, and say, hey, we want to see this guy with Chocolatito. So pressure needs to be put to bear from all directions for those who want to see this bout, not just the fans itself, but media as well, be it shows on this platform or even bigger platforms on a Twitter or Tumblr or Facebook, wherever. If you want the fight to happen, you have to force these guys' hands in order to make this fight happen. Put them in a position where they can't run away from it.
Yeah, I agree. And ESPN needs to leverage its Spanish language network and its exceptionally good Spanish language boxing programs, including shows like Golpe a Golpe, to get the fans going. You know, there's a big Spanish sports fan base especially in the southwestern, you know, area of the United States, where there's real big interest in this.
Not just ESPN Spanish language, but all Spanish language who cover boxing, whether it's Telemundo, Deportes, anything that involves boxing in the lower weight divisions that covers that area of the country and of the world. Sum this up for us, Daniel, Roman, Gallo Estrada, and the future for him.
Like I said, there's different paths for him. Granted, the ultimate goal of him is Roman Gonzalez. There's different paths. Yes, he can go after Luis Concepcion's belt. He can challenge Cuadras essentially as a title eliminator. He can even try to be, because of, remember, Nacho Inoue's contract he has in Japan, it's a pretty harsh contract if you tend to look at it, where one of his fights either has to be a, like, I think top 5 in their division or a champion. That's a pretty harsh contract.
Well, he performs, he delivers. He's in a position to dictate.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Why not go that way? Why not go that way? We know Inoue is still a little bit green, so why not do that? Accommodate yourself. They're both relatively young still, so try to go different routes, and then eventually, like I said, you can have round robins where eventually the winner fights Chocolatito. Even though we all know that Inoue is, HBO already has the writing on the wall for Inoue and Chocolatito. You just have to. Estrada has to force his way into it. It's not that difficult, but it's not that easy at the same time.
I want to move on into some news developments here. I want to talk about some heavyweight boxing, combine 2 stories into one. Over the past week, we found out that Luis Ortiz is signing with Matchroom Sports. We've also found out within the last 48 hours or so that Tyson Fury has been stripped of his belts, and I think his boxing license is in jeopardy now. The connection between that and Ortiz, who's the #1 contender for Fury's former WBA belt, and the overall landscape of the heavyweight division. How is this affecting that? The Ortiz signing with Matchroom as well as Fury being stripped of the belts. And I'll just go open up anybody who want to respond.
It's very sad, but the actions against Fury needed to be taken. And I'm glad they were taken relatively swiftly. The authorities in Britain didn't, sort of dig around and make excuses or, want to investigate or this or that. The evidence was clear. Fury himself has been pretty darn forthcoming about his issues, and he's got issues. And the heavyweight division was, before all this happened, was on the brink of an amazing resurgence after many, many years. And it's smart to get these issues out of the way and get back to the business of is restoring the health of the heavyweight division. You have some amazing young talent and some new faces. And one of those newer faces, who's not particularly young, but is fresh to a lot of fans, is Luis Ortiz. And he had a couple of great fights, and he's been on the shelf ever since. And that is death to your career. And he made the right move. And so did Eddie Hearn in picking him up.
I mean, it leaves the division in chaos, Daniel. I mean, where does Joseph Parker go now that the belts are vacant? Does he fight Andy Ruiz for the vacant WBO belt? Does he still try to fight Anthony Joshua? Where does Vlad Klitschko go? Could he position himself for that WBO belt? Could he get that WBA belt back? Because I don't think he's going to fight Luis Ortiz. So could he use his power, his pull, to get himself that belt back without fighting him? Will we see Klitschko and Joshua for the IBF belt? And then again, you got Deontay Wilder out there sitting idle. So chaotic right now in the heavyweight division. It's crazy.
Well, we have to make one distinction first. Tyson Fury was not stripped. He actually voluntarily vacated all 3 belts.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Well, yeah. Right, and that is a right clarification. Of course, he did it before they took them, but that is the truth.
That is the truth, and in many ways, it is a little bit more honorable to do it that way rather than be stripped.
Absolutely, it is. And I mean, if you know the writing's on the wall and it's about to happen, you might as well give them up. But he was in many ways forced to do it.
Yeah, right now his British boxing license has been revoked, so that's already out the window. Now, as far as what it shapes up for the heavyweight division, yeah, you're gonna see Joseph Parker versus Andy Ruiz. Joseph Parker's management is gonna take the path of least resistance to get him a title. And and the WBO seems to be the best fit. Now, here's where the situation is tricky, and you pointed it out, Mike. Klitschko right now is currently ranked the number 2 contender in both the WBO and the WBA. Now, the WBA does have a tendency lately to give the belt back to the former champion. So there's a good chance that Klitschko will get the WBA belt back. And Klitschko, as a man that does honor his mandatories, will face most likely, unless Eddie Hearn can really fix the situation really fast, Alexander Usmanov. Or Luis Ortiz will fight Usmanov in December, win that, and then we'll fight Klitschko. And then the winner of that fights whoever Lucas Brown's fighting. The main issue that's going to be with the heavyweight division is the big talk Eddie Hearn's been trying to do is, we're making Joshua Klitschko. There's already been enough U.S. outlets have reported that the issue is the networks. Klitschko is still, I think he has 1 or 2 fights left, but he's still contractually obligated to HBO. And obviously Anthony Joshua is with Showtime. That causes enough roadblocks to it, and it's true. He can also go the WBO route if he feels like it, get the WBA belt back, and then fight Joseph Parker for the vacant WBO belt because he has more of a legitimate case than Eddie Reese has. But that throws a lot of division in disarray. Now, when it comes to Luis Ortiz, I'm both surprised and pleased by the move. I'm surprised in the sense of the fact that I do feel like there has to be a little bit of sense of honor to me, like when it comes with Golden Boy, and they stuck by you at one of the worst aspects of your career. They've tried to do right by you as much as they could. It's not their fault nobody wants to fight you. But going to Matchroom pretty much, and I look at it like someone's getting a network landscape, it almost solidifies a near monopoly in the heavyweight division for Showtime. Because Showtime already had tried to get designs on Joseph Parker because of the Joshua fight. So unless they try to magically make this fight with Andy Ruiz on a Pacquiao undercard, you could see Joseph Parker on Showtime and pretty much have Klitschko be the only major heavyweight fighter on HBO, which would make any title unification almost impossible from a network standpoint, because you're going to then demand a joint pay-per-view. And as popular as Anthony Joshua is, and as people like Deontay Wilder, Vladimir Klitschko versus either one of those two, it's not enough for a joint pay-per-view fight, especially after Maypac.
What I would do go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I'm about to say, but in the end, that's just the chaos.
If I was Joshua, I would try to make that Fury Klitschko bout. I would let Klitschko do whatever he wanted to do regarding the WBA, because I fear they're going to give him his belt back. I let Parker fight for that WBO belt against Ruiz. If I was Joshua's camp, I would get some fights in still, and then try to make a fight with Deontay Wilder in 2017. Because ultimately, yeah, Klitschko, he's still the big name, but Wilder Joshua is the biggest fight in that division. Period. You let that fight stew and you try to make that fight for this time next year. Because of Klitschko, yeah, he's like I said, yeah, he's a name, but he's also an older fighter. You just don't know how much he has left. You let him off by himself. What other big fight is he going to get? Especially if he ducks Ortiz, continuing to fight, defend the belt in Germany, or Ukraine or Russia, that's not going to suffice. That's not going to exceed a Joshua Wilder bout in time. So if I was the camps of Wilder and Joshua, I would try to make that. I would try to up the momentum for that potential bout. For me, that's the fight right there.
I agree.
Oh, no, logically that would be the fight. Yeah, logically that would be the fight. But we're not dealing with logic here. We're dealing with boxing.
It's boxing. Exactly.
And boxing is it's an illogical business. And honestly, like I said, economics-wise, the only thing that Klitschko will be fighting for technically will be try to get the WBC belt. Because I think that's pretty much the only belt he's never held. So, but economically, he can do fine in Germany, just staying there.
Yeah.
Because Germany is one of those markets where it's like this. It's a lot like the UK. It's self-sustaining enough where you can make decent money.
Well, and let us remember, Klitschko owns every piece of his operation. He's his own promoter. He controls all of the revenue. So even in a fight where, in theory, the gate's smaller, the purse is smaller, the pay-per-view's smaller, he still owns 100% of it on his end. You know, he pays himself, and then he takes the rest. And oh, by the way, that's him too. So you're right. He can survive on a lot less. But he's a very proud man, and legacy is in play here. And you're right. He's 41 years old. He doesn't know how long he's going to be in. Now, he claims he feels great. He appears to be in phenomenal condition. He says he's going to fight several more years. He's nowhere, not even thinking about retiring. But we've all seen these guys get old overnight. We all have seen it.
He was talking that way prior to the Fury fight, and he couldn't pull the trigger at any point during that fight. He just couldn't pull the trigger.
No, he couldn't. Well, but of course, now in retrospect, we're looking backward at that fight, knowing what we now know about Fury, you know, and that was just a crazy, awkward fight. And looking through the lens of, you know, Fury coked up, it makes you look at that fight in a very different way. How much did that affect whether Klitschko was able to react to that or not? Hard to say. Really, really hard to say. And of course, if you're Klitschko, you thinking to yourself in your heart of hearts, well, I would have won that fight if he wasn't so coked up. Who knows?
It's not just that, his age and how he looked in the last fight. Let's keep in mind here, folks, that HBO was cool, not in a good way cool, but a bad way cool, on Vlad Klitschko for a long time. Remember, they previously dumped this dude.
Well, right, because he's not an entertaining fighter to watch. He never has been. Probably, to me, his most entertaining fight in recent memory was against Bryant Jennings, who gave him a run for his money.
And right, and can contrast that with Wilder and especially Joshua. They're both hot right now. Joshua, the way they keep promoting him, he's arguably the biggest fighter in the UK right now, and he's becoming a worldwide figure.
Yeah, and he is raking in the endorsements. Under Armour is all the way behind him, as well as some other sponsors, which absolutely, when you have that revenue to work with, you have resources that you didn't have before. It's a big deal. These are two good-looking young guys, peak of condition. For once, they're both under 30. You know, they're in the prime. It's got to happen. I don't want to be ageist with these guys, but you know, boxing has a shelf life, and they got to get to it. And and they are both wildly entertaining outside the ring. They're tremendous interviews. They're fun. They engage, you know, in all the right ways. So those things are very important, building up a fight. You know that Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder will have the time of their lives leading up to the fight. And so will
Indeed.
we.
Oh, yeah.
And so will we as fans. It's going to be great. You know, whatever trash talking or engagement they do will be, you know, sort of in the spirit of fun. You know, neither of them are mean guys. So, you know, it's something that's going to be great for everyone to watch, including the casual boxing fans, which is so important to this sport. You know, we did wrong by those fans with Mayweather-Pacquiao debacle. You know, can we get them back with a fight like Joshua and Wilder? Maybe we can.
And that's the main point for Showtime. That's the main point for Showtime. We know those designs. Like when HBO has designs on Chocolatito, Showtime has designs of both Wilder and Joshua.
Yeah.
So that's ultimately, we all know that fights. It's almost inevitable in a sense, and it has to happen based on what we're probably going to talk about later on. I mean, when we talk about the lulls that we've seen so far, but with Klitschko, like I said, it's very, very difficult to gauge what he's going to do because, yeah, he's going to be proud. He's going to want legacy. At the same time, in reality, he doesn't need it. That's the bad part. He doesn't need it.
Does he? Don't you think? I think he does. I think he does.
I don't think he does because, well, the main reason I say I don't think he does is because he's not going to be probably kind to a fight where he's going to be looked at as a passing of the torch. And I looked at all the aspects of it. Like I said, he's young. He's still relatively young. 41 is still a relatively young age in life. And he has so much other things going on. Like I said, he's his own promoter. He's currently promoting the best middleweight in the world, and now the youngest and probably in the long term most exciting cruiserweight champion in the world. And he's doing good operations.
All that is true. All that is true, but what prime top heavyweight has Klitschko beat in the last 10 years?
In the last 10 years, you know, you can argue the closest was Povetkin.
Yeah. You can make that argument.
That would be the only one that would come to mind for me.
Yeah,
but it's Povetkin. It's Povetkin Wilder. It's Povetkin Ortiz. It's Povetkin Joshua.
Hell no.
No.
Not at all.
Oh no.
But you asked me to name his best opponent in the last 10 years. That's it.
That's pretty much it. Yeah. But like I said, he'll look at that situation. Like I said, probably like, I don't really need this fight. As much as I want it, I don't really need it. But for us, we would love it because it would be a passing of the torch. We've been dying for passing of the torch, and at the time it looked like it was Fury. And now, with what we know of Fury, it's not shaping up that way. So now it's once again Klitschko's at the top of the mountain almost by default.
You mentioned the law. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but I can't let this opportunity to troll go by. Danny Garcia today announced his upcoming fight with it is what it is, with Samuel Vargas. Fight is going to take place in November in Philadelphia. Boxing social media, especially boxing Twitter, has been having a field day giving Garcia the business about this fight. I mean, look, Gail, it's a non-title fight, yes, thank goodness. But at the same time, Samuel Vargas, really? Nondescript guy, hasn't beat anybody of note. Got destroyed by Errol Spence last year. A lot of criticism coming towards Danny Garcia over the past year or so. He did himself no favors with this fight.
Well, he did himself no favors, particularly after he had that ridiculous fight with Rob Salka. I mean, he will never live that down. Never. And then he pulls this. You know, maybe he had a ghost of a chance of outliving that nightmare that he set up for himself. And then he does this. You know, he deserves every bit of trolling he's getting. And it has been swift and vicious. Keith Thurman here not too long ago posted a doctored photo of a carton of Ben & Jerry's Cherry Garcia ice cream with Danny's picture on it, saying, you know, enjoy it because I'm coming for you. And it's if it wasn't so outrageous and so off-putting to fans, you know, really it's disrespectful to those of us who are fans. But it's also really sad in a way. You know, it's not like he's a busy guy. It's not like he does 4 fights a year and this is a throwaway. He can't afford to waste his time on a fight like this.
Right.
So I'm all for guys like Keith Thurman giving him the business, and I back him up 100%.
I mean, his only saving grace, if this fight leads to a potential fight with Thurman the first quarter of next year, but given their recent history from the Garcias, particularly his father, Angel, his promoters, that's not promised. So, yeah. Troll on, Daniel.
Yeah. Well, let's put it this way. Robert Guerrero called him a sissy. I think that's the polite version of a word we've been hearing quite a bit lately in the news.
Yes.
And Errol Spence has said, wait, whoa, hey, match me up. Give it to me. Come on. And he thinks there should be a tournament. Him, Crawford, Garcia, and Thurman. Wouldn't that be interesting?
Spence would wipe the floor with Danny Garcia.
He
beat his ass all over the ring.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Garcia, for all his talent, you know, is starting to become a clown. This is ridiculous. You know, and I guess the fight is going to take place at Temple, which I do like the venue. I do like that. That's all I like about it.
I mean, proceed, Daniel. He would have been better off, Garcia, fighting that fight with Andre Berto than seeing this.
Oh, God. Oh, where should I begin? Where should I begin?
Should I just pop the popcorn and sit on back?
Pretty much, because, okay, let's go through the situation. You're granted a voluntary by the WBC because Amir Khan got knocked the fuck out by Canelo. So then, okay, Khan's out of the way. Assuming after Guerrero, okay, you're going to fight Berto. Still a name. There's still somebody that at one point held that title. You skip that. Then you go, and the rumors is that you're going to fight John Molina. Asking John Molina to go up in weight, but he's a pretty strong puncher, and we know that, and we know from the Mickey Bay fight that he can turn around a fight. That turned out to be not the case. And then you try to go to jolly old England to try to get a Mr. Sam Eggington. Literally the name that you would picture a Twitter egg to be. Sam Eggington.
Who's, I don't even think is a top 15 guy.
He's not even ranked, I think, in the top 40.
Keep talking, gentlemen. I'll check that for you.
Yeah, I think he's not even ranked in the top 40. Oh, guess what? Sam Eggington turned it down because it was too little money, according to Ari Hearn. So now you go from Sam Eggington, and then as soon as you announce the date, the rumors around that it's Kermit Cintron. Now, Kermit has been one of the more active fighters this year. And it's still a name. It's still a Puerto Rican fighter. It'll get Philly fans. But then it turns out you lowballed him. So now you wind up in this situation. I literally thought I saw Sammy Vasquez name come up. And I said, okay, that's a decent fight.
That's exactly what I thought. That's funny you say that. That is what I thought too. Decent
fight, decent contender. He's coming off a loss, but he was going to be on his way to be a title shot sooner or later. And then no, it's Sammy Vargas. And let the haterade begin. Gail mentioned Keith Thurman putting them, like I said, they're now infamous because it's been infamous for a while. The now infamous picture of Terry Garcia with Danny Garcia's name. Face planted on the bench box.
Yeah, and he said saying, well, enjoy your last treat there, cherry picker, because I'm coming for you. Now, Garcia claims he wanted a fight like this before Thurman, and he's promising Thurman in 2017. And this is the ridiculous quote, the absolutely ridiculous quote, which was that he wanted a fight like this to make his opponents think, he might be easy prey. In other words, he's using this fight to lure them in. What?
Oh, stop it.
No. Well, I know I'm repeating the nonsensical ranting.
His theory is insulting to anyone with any kind of boxing intelligence. Just stop it, Garcia.
He's insulted us over and over and over. Let us remind ourselves. Exhibit A, Rod.
He can have several seats for that kind of comment. Several seats.
When was the last time? It is pretty rare when the sanctioning bodies think a fight stinks so bad that they walk away from it. And they say,
"Yep."
Oh, I can tell you the last time.
But they walked away from Salka.
You're right, Garcia and Rod Salka.
Yeah, that was it. So when that happens, those sanctioning bodies, they want their dough. They will do whatever it takes to justify sanctioning a fight, and they couldn't do it. That's how bad that fight was.
What I want to know is, what are you offering? First of all, what purse are you offering that would make a guy literally, and hopefully, Gail, you got the rankings up for us, a guy that's literally named Sam Eckington.
40, by the way, 49th. 40.
I told you.
I cannot.
He's barely in the top 50. Hello.
Yeah. And once again, how low of a person you have to do it when you get a guy like Sam Eckington to say that's too little?
Yeah. Yep. Pretty damn stinky. This is about as bad as it gets. Now, what's interesting is that Eggington is scheduled to fight, wait for it, Frankie Gavin on the 22nd in Birmingham. And I mean Birmingham, the UK, not Birmingham, Alabama. And he's a youngster. He's only 22.
I mean, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ridiculous.
And let's not forget the other sides of the spectacle of this. Remember, this fight is going to be on Spike. Spike is the only network in the PBC circle, other than Showtime, that actually pays for their fights.
Right.
They are paying for this.
And Spike has been getting, among the whole PBC universe, for a network of its scale, does fairly well. Spike has kind of become the replacement for the old Friday night fights on ESPN. Now, obviously, they aren't putting up a fight every week. And mainly their fights have been, if not top level, offer some good entertainment from time to time. And they've had a few really good fights. So, it just shows that when the model is solid and there's real money behind it, people are having to pay for product, it can work. And then you have this happen.
Like this just takes an extreme amount of chutzpah to literally present this as a fight. Oh, by the way, yeah, you're presenting this fight on Veterans Day weekend, I think.
It is November 12th.
Yes. So
in Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia. So even as a veteran, I'm insulted by this. I'm insulted by it. But I know we're going to get into the laws now, Mike, but we might as well start on it in this aspect.
I mean, there's a connection here with what I wanted to talk about. I mean, right now, we're in the month of October. We're going through a bit of a lull this month. Had a bit of a lull during the summer, as well as late winter, early spring. I want to open up and have a discussion here about why are we seeing so much periods of inactivity in terms of good competitive bouts here. My theory is in part because the troubles with the PBC and basically their shows have been canceled for the rest of the year, combination with HBO being on a budget, combination with Showtime. They talked about having a good schedule, but injuries and whatnot have thwarted that. We hadn't seen the bouts that we thought we would see. Just injuries and fighters just BSing around in the negotiation table with potential fights on that network. I think it's all played a role into what has been kind of a down year, or at the very least, the periods of inactivity that we've seen so far in 2016. It's like we'll have a couple of good bouts here, a big bout there, and then you'll go weeks, if not a month or so, without any real fights of note to speak on. Then you have a decent bout. You have a pay-per-view bout with a Canelo or whatnot, or a Triple G bout, and then you have the same thing over and over again. It's odd because at the beginning of the year, you saw so much potential of what could become in 2016. It just hasn't lived up to it this year.
Well, you've had a few dominoes fall along the way. And the structure of the PBC, unfortunately, hasn't been nimble enough to accommodate some of these changes. Plus, the whole issue with Klitschko and Fury has really taken a lot of oxygen out of the room. Just as we were all getting excited about the heavyweight division bringing fans back to the sport, it kind of imploded on itself. And that's been truly unfortunate. We wouldn't be in quite as much of a lull if we had the original fight come off in July and all of the rest of the heavyweight division fall in line and have more fights made. So that took out a big slice of the boxing pie right there. PBC has tied up most of its major talent, its A talent, to the point that they've had one fight this year. One fight. That is not enough. That's where we're losing a lot of these dates that are in the early fall. We should have been seeing these guys back out there. And the networks who were holding dates and the venues that were holding dates, have all let them go. The money isn't there for it. And these guys are now in a world of hurt. They're paralyzed. They have to either jump off the cliff and get out of their contracts to try to get more fights, or try to stick around long enough hoping those will really come through. And then you have dumb shit stuff like Garcia today, which messes up things for guys like Thurman and Spence and so forth. So you have that. You have the networks running out of money, again, somewhat as a result of Mayweather-Pacquiao. Your other big two stars of the sport, your big draws, as you mentioned, Golovkin and Canelo, both should have had one more fight each this year and didn't for various reasons, difficulty finding opponents, and mainly because Canelo is, let me back up and say, because De La Hoya, not Canelo, is so busy keeping Canelo out of Golovkin's way, and everybody else is trying to stay out of Golovkin's way, that you've got that issue. The truth is, there are a lot of great fights to watch. We were talking about this before the show. If you're a fan There's tremendously good fights going on, but they're not in the United States. They're in Great Britain. They're in Japan. They're not on American television. You got to look for them. You can find them. You can find streams. You can always find the fights on YouTube, but they're not happening here. And that's the real issue.
I mean, to your point, I'll go to Daniel with this. You can find more consistent quality bouts now in England than you can in the United States. I mean, hell, there's more champions in the UK right now than there is in the United States.
Well, there are certain ways you have to look at it in this sense, and that was what I wanted to do a quick segue into it, because you described one aspect of it, Mike, the PBC, and we just talked about Danny Garcia. To me, right now, no fighter epitomizes the the PBC mentality more than Danny Garcia. A fighter that fights rarely, gets a lot of money for it, but his opposition has been not exactly exemplary. And that's been the whole aspect of it. There's a lot of dominoes that fell into it, and a lot of it has to do with Maypac. Mainly is that a lot of people have felt frustrated. Like I said, we felt really, really frustrated by the angst that fight put us through. Then there is the aspect of one of the effects of the PBC model, which is dragging everybody that's not with the PBC to HBO, and therefore straining HBO's budget into a point where even they can't make a lot of the fights that they want to make. And like I said, not to mention when it came to that, there's the whole aspect of one of the markets essentially being taken out in New York. We have just seen recently even Star Boxing, which is pretty much one of the few local New York State promotions, pretty much now laid the flag out, say we can't fight in the state anymore because of the insurance bond. You have that going on into it. And it turns out it's because the insurance policy that technically that promoters have to buy doesn't actually exist yet. Insurance companies haven't developed it yet. There's that aspect of it. And when you have that going on, and when you have the PBC over the past year pretty much just flooding the market with overall not real good quality fights. They've had some gems, but those have been few and far between overall. And in all honesty, that's one thing that's affecting the sport. When if you flood the market with a bad product, people are going to turn away from the market. Because you make people assume that the only thing in the market is a bad product.
Well, and here's the problem too. When they do have a good fight, when they do get a lot of eyeballs, they don't seem to have the infrastructure to follow it up. Errol Spence had that afternoon bout right as the Olympics were ending, between the last events and the closing ceremony, and had 6 million viewers. 6 million viewers. They should have done everything it took to capitalize on that, everything possible, and get that to touch off a little bit of a brush fire and get on a roll. And what did they do? Nothing. They did squat. I have heard all of the wonderful things said about Al Heyman as a businessman. I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. Anybody running a business would know if you strike pay dirt, you put every bit of your resources behind that and capitalize on it as much as possible.
The question, though, Gail, is when you just pointed out that number, and you pointed out right afterwards, and like I said, actually, Jim Lampley in the Fight Game actually mentioned this in his episode, in his final like little monologue against the PBC in this last episode. He mentioned the 6 million figures, and I did ask this when the time comes into it. How much of that was just simply people that were watching the main sport that Americans pay attention to and during the Olympics, basketball? How many people just really coming from that, going into it? And how much did NBC weigh that down, saying, okay, people weren't sticking around because of boxing. They were just presented free entertainment.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. People do still have a choice, and they can turn it off. There's a lot of other stuff going on. It was a Sunday afternoon, or they could get up and get out. The fact that they retained that many people, even if it meant that the audience dropped from basketball, that's still a hell of an audience. That's still a product that's gotten in front of 6 million people. And when you own that product and you've had 6 million people sample it, and it was a very good, entertaining fight, you get that young man out there, you capitalize on that, you do everything you can to make that opportunity count. And they simply haven't done it. They haven't even tried. And maybe they'd fail. That's very possible, but they didn't even try.
In terms of Spence, then I want to say a precarious situation, if you will, because he was in line for a shot against Brook. Well, actually not in line, but he was his number one contender. Brook went on to fight Golovkin. And when you look at the rest of the welterweight landscape, I mentioned precarious position. Who's really out there among the welterweights, the top welterweights, the champions especially, who really wants to fight this dude? I mentioned how he would fare against Garcia. You know Angel Garcia is not going to put him in the ring with that kid. I will continue to say that Thurman doesn't want any of them. Look, even if Jesse Vargas was signed to PBC right now, I don't even think he would fight him. So he's kind of in a rut, if you will. The only hope is to continue to put him in the ring, keep him active. But it has to be a situation where he eventually will eventually have to land a title shot. But the question is, who's going to give him that shot? So he's kind of stuck there.
Well, and the point of the matter is, I'm sorry,
in terms of Showtime, when are we going to see Charlo and J-Rock? There are other fights out there between champions and challengers out there that could be made. What's the guy at 130 who Flores is promoting?
Farmer?
Yeah,
no, not
Farmer, but
Monte Davis.
Right, he was supposed to be in line for a title shot. That bout was supposed to be on Showtime. That hasn't happened yet. You mentioned Farmer. When he's going to land a title shot? Would love to fight Pedraza. So yeah, there are fights out the featherweights with Russell, with Frampton, with Santa Cruz. Selby's there in the mix. When are we going to see those guys dance in the ring with each other? So yeah, part of it, Showtime hasn't lived up to the end of the bargain here. They got to get these fights to happen.
Well, you mentioned one fight, J-Rock and Charlo. I've been in the opinion that fight is never going to happen simply because Charlo is going to move up to middleweight. He's a little bit too big, and probably he doesn't want any of J-Rock. So that's probably going to wind up happening. And you mentioned that fight. There's still the Gale Jack that still hasn't been officially announced with a date coming up. And we were promised that in September.
And also you got Andrade up there at 54. You got Lara up there at 54. host of good fighters at 154. Why aren't these guys fighting each other?
That's the main point. It's mainly a lot of it money, and I think when it comes particularly to Showtime, it's an interesting dynamic in Showtime when it comes to it, because they clearly made the decision that they lashed themselves to Al Heyman to the hip. And unless they ultimately decide we're not gonna just be exclusive to Al Heyman, we're actually gonna expand. We're gonna talk to Oscar De La Hoya. We're gonna legitimately talk to Bob Arum. We're gonna talk to Tom Loeffler. See, bringing more people into the mix. They're stuck with that. That's the main point. And I think mainly, Gail, like you mentioned, like the reputation Al Heyman has. Al Heyman made his bones in the music business, which is a completely different monster than sports. Music, particularly in his realm, concert promotions, is about building a large spectacle in one location, in one night, have people pay exorbitant amounts, and then have the main act go through it. And when there's a good band concert, they already got their money. But it's about presentation when it comes down to it. Boxing is not keen for that environment, even though, yeah, we love the interests that Floyd did. We love the interests that Nassim Hamed had when he was coming up. We like the interests that for as much of a boring fighter as Vladimir Klitschko gets as a fighter, his entrances were very entertaining. UK entrances are very entertaining. As long as you have something with that showmanship, that's happening, but it's not like a concert. I think that's what Al Heyman is starting to learn the hard way. Boxing cannot be built like a concert. You can't build something that organic and then create an entire spectacle of it overnight. It's just not going to happen. And everybody's suffering because of it. Like I said, HBO, you made everybody that's not with you go to HBO, and that's strained their budget when they themselves are fighting their own little corporate bullshit going on thanks to Rupert Murdoch. And you've flooded the market. Like I said, I'll go once again. You flooded the market so badly with an overall inferior product that you made a lot of networks that you paid money to show this probably not have the appetite to do it anymore. Remember, ESPN forced Al Heyman. They forced Al Heyman. After he tried to buy back those days, they forced him to give those fights, and he gave them not really good fights in exchange. And guess what? There's still that talk that as soon as the PBC contract's up, ESPN's going to give a whole bunch of money to Dana White to have the UFC there.
Right, and why wouldn't they? Because the UFC, from a marketing perspective, is doing everything boxing isn't. They're keeping their fighters in front of the public often and putting good fights together. And they've proven that the fans, to a point, are a lot less worried about records than they are about good action and entertainment. And they're getting it there. And when the UFC wants to make a big announcement, where do they go? Well, yesterday it was teased all morning. Dana White's going to be here with a big announcement on ESPN. Big announcement. And sure enough, was the announcement of Ronda Rousey coming back. They know how to position their athletes. They know how to position their entertainment. And if Al Heyman had been smart, he would have adapted the best of what the UFC does to what he's doing with Premier Boxing. For whatever reason, he hasn't. I don't know what's going on, whether he's just gotten bad advice, whether he thought that this was going to be easy and it turned out to be actual work. And he said, oh, screw that. I just wanted to make money. I didn't really want to have to work that hard for it at this point in my career. I don't know. You know, I would love if somebody could get inside the organization, get the full story, and give us one of those nice long pieces we used to see in Grantland.
Indeed.
Indeed, yeah.
We could exhaust ourselves with this discussion.
We could go on all night.
And but I want to move on and do some previews here. One main fight I want to focus on, Tony Bellew making the first defense of his WBC cruiserweight belt against BJ Flores in Liverpool, England. A lot of trash talk going in. Flores has been rather disrespectful to Bellew, saying he's been chasing him down. Bellew basically says he's going to put BJ Flores to sleep. I can't call this fight, to be honest with you. Bellew, to me, is still a light heavyweight, essentially. But Flores, throughout his career, there's been that thing missing about him. While he looks good, he does something, or should I say do something. He doesn't do something. There's something he doesn't do to complete a fight whenever he gets a big opportunity. He seems like he's just on the cusp of doing big things, but then he fails at one aspect of the game whenever he gets a big fight. Will he finally take advantage of the opportunity? Or will Bellew ride that wave of momentum from winning the vacant belts here? And I'll just open it up for anybody who wants to comment about this fight.
It's an interesting fight if you want to think about just the pure matchup, because we know Bellew's going to come to bring it. He's going to fight. And Flores is a little bit awkward in his style. And he has to use it because he's the smaller man in this fight. But in all honesty, when I look at this, because I have to look at the landscape of the cruiserweight division, and the main question that's answered is, when you look at this fight, is would you put the winner of this fight against either Ledebev or Usyk?
Not Usyk. They don't want none of that.
No, hell no. And Bellew's been very forthcoming about that. That Usyk is the talent of the division, and he's said so. He's said so for many years. He in a recent interview said in his interview with RingTV.com said, I can't blame people for putting him, meaning Usyk, ahead of me because he's that good. And said he knew he was going to win against Glavaki, and that's all well and good. Bellew's two defeats were to Adonis Stevenson and now it's escaping me. Whose other loss was to Nathan Cleverly.
Yeah.
Nathan Cleverly, right? Cleverly and Stevenson. Mm-hmm. And the Nathan Cleverly of the time that beat Bellew, those are losses with honor, I would say.
But Bellew, he didn't look good in that fight at all. Bellew against Cleverly didn't look good at all.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't look great. But he was beaten by real talent. Flores. I'm not sure if Flores really knows whether he wants to keep boxing or be an announcer or pursue all his other various interests. And I think honestly, it's going to be an advantage for Bellew to be slightly smaller than Flores, because Flores is not mobile and Flores cannot cut off a ring, and Bellew is going to run rings around him. Neither of them, despite being in these heavier weight classes, neither of them would be considered a knockout artist. Their knockout percentages are respectable, but they're more boxer punchers, and that's being generous, really. I would definitely say that about Bellew. You can barely say that about Flores. And it's interesting. I think it is closer than odds makers have it. The general betting odds have Flores as an 8-1 underdog. I don't think it's quite that bad, but I do think he's going to lose.
That's the main point. I can't get excited for this fight because, like I said, I can't if Flores wins, like I said, you put him in a ring with Usyk or Letabev, both of them will mop the floor with him.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah,
Bellew
this fight has kind of a meh feeling, doesn't it?
Yeah,
right.
And not to mention the other trash talk around it, because Tony Bellew, while still promoting this fight, is still trying to talk with David Haye about trying to make a fight at heavyweight against David Haye. So there's that little train of bananas going into it. Now, yeah, it's a meh fight, and it kind of encapsulates what we're experiencing right now in October when it comes to boxing. Because even when the UK, which has been one of the more reliable fronts of actually getting decent fights, you got a main event that's meh.
Yeah. The only thing that's going to make it interesting is it is at home. It's in Liverpool. You know, those fans will be, you know, completely hyped up, enjoying themselves. You know, they're enthusiastic no matter what kind of entertainment's in front of them. And yeah, they'll all have a good time.
And I think we may start to shut the show down on that note. I'll go around here, ladies first. Gail Falkenthal, Communities Digital News, for folks who want to talk boxing, Game of Thrones, Dancing with the Stars, or whatever. Let the folks know where they can find you.
Hey, we got to find something to talk about right in between all these fights. But do keep your eyes on those fights from overseas. There's definitely talent worth watching, and some of those names you won't know. Now's the time to pay attention, or go see some of the classic fights. And in closing, before I tell you where to find me, Monday night on Showtime, I believe it's Showtime Extreme, is going to re-air in its entirety the original live broadcast of Castillo Corrales 1.
Yeah.
That's worth seeing. And if you can't stay up that late, or it's, you know, it doesn't fit with your schedule, please set your DVR. There's a reason people talk about that fight, which is now 11 years ago, with such reverence. There's a reason. Watch it for yourself, and you'll figure out the reason and why we all talk about it the way they do. Remember, you'll thank me later. Monday night, Showtime. Look it up. All right. You can find me on Communities Digital News. It's COM, C-O-M-M, Digi, D-I-G-I News, comdiginews.com. On Twitter as PR Pro San Diego. And right now I'm watching my Chargers. So far I've held off the Denver Broncos with field goals, but you know, it's the fourth quarter, ladies and gentlemen. It's about to go down in flames.
Well, Daniel Carpio from the Inquirer, for folks who want to talk boxing or the NBA, specifically the Miami Heat, let the folks know where they can find.
Yes, folks. You can find my Ruckus99 on Twitter. Like I said, I also do a podcast with the folks at 4 Boxing News, Joe and Francis, normally on the weekends or on Mondays. And we talk about menus going to be happening going on. And yes, folks, it is Monday night, 10 p.m., Show Extreme, Castillo Corrales. There's like Gail mentioned that his fight's reference. There's a reason a lot of people call this fight, even with all the fights that have happened of significance, the greatest fight of all time. There's a reason Castillo Corrales carries that aura to this day. So yes, put yourselves in your seats, folks. Go on Show Extreme, find it on your cable subscription or your satellite subscription, and watch it, because that broadcast, everything was perfect about that. The fight itself, the broadcast in that fight, the crowd, everything about that day in that arena was perfect.
Y'all heard him. Monday, 10 p.m., Showtime Extreme, the re-airing of the classic of classic fights, Diego Chico Corrales, Jose Luis Castillo. Please check it out. But for folks who want to talk boxing with me, you can find me on Twitter. You know what it is. Brother JR on Twitter at Brother JR76. Once again, I'll repeat something I said at the beginning of the show. If you want to find out all things Pound for Pound Box Report, please check out the blog page. P4PBoxingReport.wordpress.com. You look to the right of the blog page, you'll find links to find the pages on Facebook, Tumblr, G+. You can also find the links to find us on Twitter, where to listen to us on Google Play Music, Stitcher Radio, SoundCloud, iTunes, Player.fm, as well as the email address, which is p4pboxingrpt@gmail.com. I'll be honest here. We mentioned the laws in the sport. Because of that, I don't know if I'll have a show next week. Nothing really happening. I do have standards, so I will not talk about Juan Manuel Lopez and Wilfredo Vasquez Jr. I do have standards. Nothing really happening in the sport until early November. So I may have a show next week, or I may take advantage and take a week or two off. I'm not sure. I'll let you know. So for Gail Falcon Communities Digital News with Daniel Carpio, the subscriber, I'm your host, Michael. This has been episode 143, Pound for Pound Box Report. Everybody have a good evening, good night.
Good night. Stay safe.
Indeed,
Stay safe, folks. Well,